Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. Today, I'm joined by a special guest, Mariann Őry. She is a journalist from Hungary, and she works for Hungary Today and Eurasia magazine. I've been following personally the Hungarian affairs for a year or two because I was fascinated by the insistence of Hungary to pursue its own national interest, especially when it comes to the domestic affairs, and also now, especially after the recent hostilities in Ukraine on the foreign policy level. So I thought it's a brilliant idea to host Mariann. She is a brilliant journalist. I also put her Twitter link in the description. Please go and follow her, guys, because in my opinion, it's very important to understand perspectives. And nowadays there is an insistence to portray like entire Europe as if it's one block or one opinion. And the same thing goes to other regions of the world. So the particularities, let's say, of each state, its culture, history, national interest is very important to shed light on it. So Mariann, thank you very much for accepting my invitation. It's really a pleasure.
Thank you for the invitation.
It's a really pleasure, and I would like to shed light on Hungary today, and I would like to start with you with the Orban's leadership. It seems that unlike most European or EU member countries, Hungary, under Orban's leadership, has taken a unique foreign policy approach, distancing itself from counterproductive measures against Russia or the Ukraine war in general. Recently, Prime Minister Orban said, I quote, "The Hungarian government doesn't consider it appropriate to assume that Russia will threaten the security of Hungary or Europe, and therefore doesn't intend to join the sanctions regime against Moscow." I will play this, I would say, the short clip of Orban, where he basically said this statement. And let's see what he said, and we come back and discuss this issue.
Lássunk túl Brüsszelen. Minden ország tisztában van az ukrajnai háború korlátozott jelentőségével, és saját nemzeti érdeke elsődlegességével. Ne szigeteljük el magunkat a világ józanul gondolkodó részétől. A magyar felfogás csak Európában kivétel, a világban általános. A magyar kormány nem tartja életszerűnek azt a feltételezést, hogy Oroszország fenyegetné Magyarország vagy Európa biztonságát. Ez legfeljebb az atomfegyverekre igaz, de azok bevetésének kockázatát az ukrán háború nem csökkenti, hanem növeli. A hagyományos hadviselés tekintetében az ukrán háború éppen azt mutatta meg, hogy Oroszországnak semmi esélye sem lenne a NATO ellen. Értjük, hogy az ukránok megpróbálják elhitetni Európával, hogy az oroszok nem állnak meg az Atlanti-óceánig, de ezt a fenyegetést a magyarok nem veszik be. Az egész világ láthatta, hogy az orosz haderő nincs abban a helyzetben, és jó ideig nem is lesz, hogy megtámadja a NATO-t.
So the Hungarian position toward Ukraine, probably an exception in Europe, but not for the rest of the world, as Orban said. Can you please explain the main pillars of Hungary's foreign policy toward the proxy war in Ukraine? And what are the national interests of Budapest in this conflict?
I think it's a very important aspect to understand Hungary's position is that while we are situated next to Ukraine, Ukraine is a neighboring country for us. And it's also an important factor is that there are 150,000 members of Hungarian minority living in Ukraine in Transcarpathia. So their security is a great concern for us. Also, there is one peculiarity is that Hungary, because of its, the physical reality, Hungary is dependent on Russian energy resources. So, this is the main reason why Hungary's main interest is that we should stay out of the war. Hungary shouldn't be dragged into the war. This is why the Hungarian government is saying from the very beginning is that we should stay out of the war, and we also should not transfer any weapons to Ukraine because, those countries who are sending weapons to Ukraine are basically involved in the war even if only indirectly.
Mm-hmm. Actually, the energy interest, for example, of Hungary with Russia exists, as you mentioned. It's the same here in Germany, but we are here in Germany. We're going against the interests of the let's say the residents of Germany. I'm not a German, but it seems to me that there is an insistence on playing a dangerous game, which goes against the interests of the German national interests here. But in Hungary, it's not only the ruling party or the parties speaking about this line, but the leader of the third biggest party in Hungary stated in February, I quote, "Ukraine is BlackRock's land now. They already sold Ukraine." Is it safe to assume that the opposition also shares the vision of Hungary's government? And what does he mean by this statement? The Ukraine is BlackRock's land. They already sold Ukraine. Who sold Ukraine to who?
Yeah, well, regarding the opposition, unfortunately, we couldn't say that what Mr. Toroczkai, the president of the Our Homeland Party, the Mi Hazánk Party, said is not representative of the whole opposition, because we have the so-called joint opposition. So those parties who ran together in the previous elections, those are predominantly left liberal parties. And what they are saying is completely in line with the EU mainstream. Like the main party in that camp, DK, the Democratic Coalition, is a left liberal party led by former Prime Minister Ferenc Gyurcsány. Basically, his party is arguing for the United States of Europe. So they would completely undermine the country's sovereignty and just go together with the EU, whatever crazy thing they have in mind. So Toroczkai's position, the Mi Hazánk's position, is unique in the parliament. There aren't too many opposition parties who say the same. In the parliament, there is his party, the Our Homeland, and outside the parliament, there is the Hungarian Workers' Party, who share this position. Toroczkai is quite openly speaking about problems regarding Ukraine, but also figures on the conservative side and the Hungarian government have also said that basically this is a proxy war. The United States is heavily involved. They have been there, not just from last February, but from the last 10 years, basically, building their own positions there. Prime Minister Orban has also said that we need peace talks, not between Russia and Ukraine, but between Russia and the United States. And he also said that there won't be peace in Ukraine until the United States wants that. So basically, he's also saying that as long as the United States is pouring weapons, intelligence, any kind of resources into Ukraine, basically they themselves are also pushing Ukraine to continue this war, even when they would be actually a bit closer to start some kind of peace talks, as they almost started peace talks in last spring.
Amazing insight. Actually, here in Germany, we have 6 political parties in the federal parliament, and the far left party called Die Linke, few member of parliaments from this party, they called for protest last Saturday actually. And they managed to gather 50,000 Germans or residents. Let's say I was there. It was a peace rally calling for halting the arm deliveries to Ukraine and negotiations with Russia, which in my opinion, it seems reasonable. The problem, however, is there is always this sensitivity in Germany about the far right, for example. The far right party as a bloc in Germany, they are against this proxy war. They want to lift the sanctions. They want to open ties with Russia again, and they just want this war to be over through diplomatic means. But because of this sensitivity, there is always this idea that, the left shouldn't cooperate with the right because otherwise they will be called also right-wingers, right? And because of the history of Germany, we have seen the media here, they waged a brutal campaign against these 2 left-wing MPs who participated in the rally, because there was some right-wing MPs who were among the crowds. So they just pick up these two people among the crowd and they say, look, those are sympathizers, these MPs from the left, they are rallying with the right wing. So this is discredited. But I was watching, for example, the demo in the United States, Rage Against the War Machine. And I watched what Jimmy Dore, who is a comedian, by the way, but he understands geopolitics, in my opinion, better than many politicians nowadays, unfortunately. And he was saying this is a time for unity between the right and left. Those who are against the war, whether you're right, whether you're center, whether you're left, we have to come together to rage against the war. And this is, in my opinion, what most scares those who are in charge of taking these big decisions, to go to war, to send weapons. So this divide and conquer strategy is always happening. If the left and the right, I'm not talking about all the parties, right? But if any, let's say, politicians or even voters unite together against this war, it would be a really big trouble for those who are insisting up until this moment to send hard weapons. And imagine we have a party here called the Green Party, and they call themselves a left-wing party, and they participated in the election in 2021 with the motto by saying we don't want to send arms to war zones. This was their motto when they participated in the elections, and now.
Crazy.
It's the Green Party actually pressuring on Olaf Scholz to send these Leopard tanks to Ukraine, and those are calling their policy feminist foreign policy, and everything has been twisted nowadays. Left-wingers are becoming warmongers. Feminist foreign policy is becoming increasingly sending weapons to war zones, and I truly don't know how do I identify myself anymore, because when I came to Germany, I grew up in a left-wing family, and I'm not finding myself a place in the left-wing scene here, as if the left-wing is changing its attitude, its policy, unfortunately. But when it comes to Hungary, it's no more only about just pursuing the foreign policy interests of Hungary, but recently Hungary replaced the ambassador to NATO, who was a friend of the Secretary General of NATO, Stoltenberg. Are we, in your opinion, witnessing a denatoization of Hungary in this regard?
I wouldn't say that. Certainly, the previous Hungarian ambassador to NATO, he was more experienced in the NATO circles, because he was working there even before he was an ambassador, but the cooperation between Hungary and the NATO is still very close on the level of the Hungarian Defense Forces and the Defense Ministry. What is important to mention, though, is that Mr. Orban has said recently on several occasions is that NATO is supposed to be a defensive alliance, and no member of the NATO can be forced to go to war against a third country. Even if some member states in the NATO want to go to war, then if they want to do that, of course, we can't stop them from doing that, but they should do it outside the NATO. So I think that the Hungarian government's hope now is that the NATO as an alliance doesn't want to get involved in the war. Well, luckily, I think more or less this is the case so far. But of course, it's a very hard situation for Hungary, and very, very, very little room to maneuver. As also the Prime Minister said, is that while Hungary is a member of the EU, also a member of the NATO, two Western alliances, and basically all the main players in these two alliances are not speaking of peace. As Mr. Orban said in the State of the Nation speech, basically in the West, in the peace camp, there are two countries, Hungary and the Vatican. That's quite a good company, but apart from that, the peace camp should be bigger. And unfortunately, we also see what you mentioned about leadership of Germany, is that it's quite, crazy to watch also from Hungary, is that the leaders of the main European countries, main Western countries, are basically saying is that this war should go on until Ukraine wins it, and Europe should make sacrifices. We should make sanctions, which are basically harming us much more than they are harming Russia. While I think that the vast majority of European people, just want the war to end. And I remember that there have been also polls made in Germany, and the majority of people of course they're also reading the Western media, but there are more and more people who are saying that it's not really their priority that Ukraine wins the war. I mean, they just want this war to end, and they don't want to lose all their savings. They want to pay their bills. They want to have a normal life, afford a normal life. And why the mainstream European leaders are completely going against the interests of the average people. And of course, they didn't really ask them about it anyway. Like the German foreign minister, she also said in many occasions that she doesn't really care about, what the people think.
She said it literally. I don't care what my voters think. She will support Ukrainians as long as it takes. This is the statement. This is not a political statement. If you're a politician, you cannot say as long as it takes, because there is always a limit for how much you can support. Yes. If things get out of control, means you have to back off. You have to resort to diplomacy. And sometimes I really question the intelligence of these politicians, because this is not a war against, let's say, Syria, who cannot harm the United States. This is not a war somewhere that this country do not have nuclear weapons. This is a serious battle. And in 2014, because I was covering the war in Syria extensively, but I never thought that there would be a world war because of Syria. But when the coup d'etat happened in 2014, and I flew to Donetsk in 2015 to see what's happening there, and I really thought that the Russians are really exaggerating about the presence of the neo-Nazis there and all this sin stuff. But when I came back from there and I studied Brzezinski, reread the book of Brzezinski, The Grand Chessboard, and I understood the American foreign policy interest there, that they have to stop the integration, the economic integration between Germany and Russia, because if Germany and Russia get along economically, that means the Eurasian region would be independent, and they would not need the American protection by NATO, and they would not need the American dependency on American economy, for example, or financial affairs. So this was a moment when I realized, like, if a world war would happen nowadays, it would be because of Ukraine. Because anyone who controls now Ukraine, it will have a bigger influence over Eurasia, and who controls Eurasia controls the world. And at the moment, we are on the verge of a nuclear war. People really need to understand this is not a joke. And they have to listen other perspectives. So blocking, for example, the Russian outlets, so that, okay, Russians do propaganda as well, because it's their war too. And in all wars, they are propaganda. But if you don't listen the concerns of the other part, you will think the other part do not have a concern, and it's just a crazy madman in the Kremlin who woke up in the morning and he decided to invade Ukraine. If you don't listen what the Russians were saying from the 90s, that, guys, you promised not 1 inch to the east of Berlin. And this was all written. And now when the NATO expanded all the way to the borders, they consider it as a threat. So we have to discuss this issue. And this is not like I'm trying to justify invasion, because it's illegal. The Russians did an illegal act of aggression against Ukraine. But I'm not also naive to come and say, no, it wasn't provoked. It's just a madman who wants to expand in Europe. No, it's not like that. Yeah. So it's very important to shed light what the other side is saying nowadays. Otherwise, when you are ignorant, you will not make your calculations correctly. And this is what's happening here in Germany, that foreign minister like Annalena Baerbock, I'm sorry, but she's not well informed. She's not well educated about these geopolitical issues. And her job is to prepare the grounds for diplomacy. This is the job of the foreign minister, and not to come and say we are at war with Russia. Right? It's really crazy and twisted how what times are we living? But Hungary, they're also voicing concerns about the Hungarians, ethnic Hungarians living in Ukraine nowadays. And I will quote the the Hungarian foreign minister. He said, "Law after law, they reduce the rights of ethnic Hungarians in Ukraine." And I will just play this segment so that we see what he exactly said in this regard. This is from a Hungarian page, and it's also translated.
2015-öt követően az ukránok lépésről lépésre, törvényről törvényre sértették meg és csökkentették a magyar nemzeti közösség jogait. Az a tény, hogy a magyar nemzeti közösségtől elvették azt a jogot, hogy a teljes spektrumú nemzeti nyelvű oktatáshoz hozzáférjen, az olyan szinten sérti nem csak a kétoldalú egyezményeket, hanem az Európai Unió ide vonatkozó jogszabályait is, amely sok deklarált ukrán szándék hitelességét megkérdőjelezi. Amikor elkezdődött a háború, mi ezt az egész kérdést zárójelbe tettük, nem felejtettük el, csak zárójelbe tettük, mert azt gondoltuk, hogy nem korrekt ezzel a kérdéssel háború idején előállni. De ezek után Ukrajna a közelmúltban elfogadott még egy törvényt a kisebbségekkel, a nemzeti kisebbségekkel kapcsolatban, amely törvény még tovább rontotta a nemzeti közösségek helyzetét, és még több jogot vett el a nemzeti kisebbségektől. Most kérdezem én, mi szüksége volt az ukránoknak arra, hogy egy háború idején, amikor elvileg számítanak a szomszédos országok segítségére, akkor olyan jogszabályt hozzanak, amely még tovább sérti, még tovább csökkenti a nemzeti közösségek jogait. Köztük a magyarokét. Mi szükség volt erre?
Why do you think the international community is silent on these human rights violations against minority groups in Ukraine? Is it is it a situation that they don't care about them, or it's just a wartime that they want to prioritize their foreign policy interests in Ukraine?
Well, this is a very, very legitimate question. I think that there are, two factors here. One is that the European political mainstream just doesn't really care about national minorities. They care about all other kind of minorities. National minorities is not really their priority. The other thing is that when it comes to Ukraine, the double standards are striking. So basically, Ukraine can get away with anything when it comes to, democracy, minority rights, media freedom, anything really. And when Hungary speaks about it, and not since last February, but for quite many years now, we are always labeled that you only say this because you are serving the interests of Russia. And, when it comes to the Hungarians living in Transcarpathia, neighboring country to Hungary, this is a question between us and between Ukraine. Putin, Russia has nothing to do there, really. So, of course, the issue of national minorities in Ukraine, that's a question for Russia too, because we understand, surely, that these measures are aimed mainly against the Russian-speaking minority. It's not mainly against Hungarians, but this doesn't help, Hungarians in Transcarpathia in any way.
That's a really complicated situation in Ukraine nowadays, and I've seen lots of videos from Ukraine where even they are really persecuting. I don't know what they call them, the gypsies, I think, also the Russian-speaking people. And I've seen videos even before the war, the neo-Nazi groups, for example, they went to the gypsy camps and they burned down their camps, kicking them out from their lands. There is a real problem, let's say, in Ukraine against the minorities, and there is a high level of, I would say, nationalistic feelings that has been also fueled by outside support. But we have a prime minister in Hungary. He made statements that I would like to share with you guys first.
Közép-Európa egy jelentős gazdasági súlyt képvisel
az Európai Unióban. Szerintem nem lehet úgy beszélni velünk, ahogy az utóbbi időben ez néha előfordult. Nem csak azért, mert nem illik, mert rendes ember nem beszél így, vagy mert bizonyos európai normákat mindenkinek be kell tartani, ezek is fontos szempontok. Hanem arról is szó van, hogy olyan súlyt képviselünk az európai gazdaságban, amely tiszteletet parancsol. Úgyhogy kiköveteljük magunknak a tiszteletet. Azt nem fogjuk elfogadni, hogy valamelyik Európai Uniós más tagállam mondja meg például azt, hogy a magyar gyerekeket hogyan neveljük. Az lehetetlen. Ez egy félreértése az európai helyzetnek. Azt nem fogadjuk el, hogy bármelyik Európai Uniós ország azt mondja, hogy bármelyik közép-európai országot ő térdre akarja kényszeríteni. Szóval ennek a gyarmattartó tempónak ideje véget vetni.
Basically, Orban says this colonizer attitude needs to stop. It doesn't work. Do you also find it ironic that conservative or right-wing parties in the West are pursuing traditionally left-wing policies, and their rhetoric is increasingly becoming anti-imperialist or anti-interventionist, whereas many left-wing groups are embedding themselves with the liberal establishment?
Yes, well, certainly. Certainly ironic, yes. But from a Hungarian perspective, it's really understandable, because what we can see from the European Union is that they are completely disregarding the sovereignty of the member states, and increasingly they are overstepping their own competences, lecturing countries, pressurizing countries, basically blackmailing countries in spheres which the EU has nothing to do with, like, as the Prime Minister mentioned, the education of our children, for example.
I mean, this intervention in the domestic affairs of the EU countries, they may find excuses that Hungary, for example, is a member state, and we have to bring them under the umbrella of our values, etc. But this goes beyond that. Imagine that the EU comes and they will teach and they preach in a high tone, in an arrogant way, other people in different parts of the world who have different culture, different language, different history, and they want to tell them how to live their lives. And this is the crazy part. For example, you remember during the World Cup that there is all this talk about the LGBTQ plus rights in Qatar, although I criticize Qatar day and night for its foreign policy, for example, but I find it really arrogant for anyone to come and teach these people how they live, how they should live, how should they organize their family affairs, and what values should they teach to their children. Do whatever you want in your countries. If I come and live in your country, I would totally respect your values. I would abide by your laws and regulations, but don't come to other countries and preach them how to live. And the same thing happened in Syria for a very long time. I come from Syria and I know how the society works there and what values the people in general believe. So when you come and impose your ruling system, that you want to impose a liberal democratic system on Syria, on a society that is a patriarchal society, that is completely, they derive their values, traditions, etc. from religion, from the church, from the mosque, the society functions differently, right? So it leads into failure, because the system in the West or in Western European countries, the liberal democracies, it's a product, it's a result of a historical process. And it didn't happen in one way or another. People decided to adopt this political system, right? So it's different there. And when I speak about these cases, I'm accused of promoting dictatorships. I'm not supporting dictatorships. I'm trying to explain that this is a process and the people have to come to conclusion which political system they need to adopt in their countries, or even the values, which is very important for a country like Hungary, which is in Eastern Europe. And if you make a referendum now and ask the people, in my opinion, because I'm following Hungary for at least 2 years now, the vast majority will choose conservative values over the far left neoliberal ideas that the establishment is trying to push, and they're trying to choke the people with their ideas. This is the thing. Like, you can believe in whatever you want, but why are you choking me or choking my kids about your values? I don't know if this is really controversial. Is it really controversial what I believe in?
No.
I'm just asking to respect the other side, and this is how we can make international politics and treat each other as peers. But recently, you have another visit in Hungary by the USAID chief Samantha Power. She was in Hungary. She declared new projects in the country, and this is a video actually she posted on her Twitter account. I will show you guys this video.
I came to Budapest to discuss USAID's new support for the Hungarian people, but I also underscored that the United States wants to work more closely with Hungary. A central component of this work is making progress together on addressing some key challenges to democracy and helping secure respect for the rights and dignity of all people. I sat down with members of independent media and civil society organizations that are dedicated to promoting the rule of law and exposing corruption here in Hungary. The U.S. government is committing $20 million to bolster civil society, to help independent media thrive and reach new audiences, and to support community-led initiatives that can empower local groups trying to make change. We are looking forward to working with the Hungarian people in building the future they want.
Is she really in Hungary to promote or support independent media, civil society, or are you worried about such type of projects that could pave the way for a CIA-type color revolution in your country?
Yeah, well, the arrogance of this video is just striking. Really, really. So, I mean, we are on a global scale, Western country, a member of the EU, and now we are like treating as some little country in the third world, who just, don't really have media or anything, and they have to come here and civilize us. This is, I think, really just infuriating. And the attempts actually to have color revolutions, not new. In Hungary, there have been several attempts over the years to make a Maidan in Budapest, but it's not really working for them because the Hungarian society is not really open to that. Most Hungarians are very protective of their sovereignty. Also, the support of the government is very stable, so they are by far the most supported party. It's not like in many neighboring countries that the government is like 20% and the second opposition party has like 18%. So it's nothing like that. The proportions are completely different, and also the Hungarian opposition, the joint opposition, who did actually admittedly get money from US NGOs and various sources. They are just really, really incompetent. So whoever is investing money in them, they should be, I think, very, very disappointed.
Actually, they spent $15 million just recently on supporting independent Syrian media outlets and journalists. $15 million. And I feel really sorry for them too, because I'm sitting here behind my desk and I'm able to do a better work than they do. And I'm able really to present a point of view that can counter their narratives. And I also, because I speak from the minds and the hearts of the people in Syria, the majority, let's say. Of course, there are people who believe in the American dream and American democracy and all these cliches that we have been hearing since the Iraq War or Afghanistan War. But most of the people lost their faith in the Americans. So all this money they are throwing on these so-called NGOs and independent media, yes, it could be effective if these people are outside of the country. But when they are inside of the country, they will be countered by the people themselves too. Imagine a so-called journalist funded by the USAID in Syria and is walking in the street. How would he even face the people? Like, seriously, I'm asking this question by myself, because the people will be very, very angry on them, knowing that they are collaborating with the American side. But as I mentioned, the Syrians are actually very grateful that Hungarian volunteers and aid have been sent to Syria. and the Hungarian Maltese, if I'm not mistaken, Maltese charity rescue team and 2 medical clinics have been set up in Syria. Now, do you expect Hungary to play any role or lead a role in the process of breaking the European siege and embargo on Syria, or Hungarians aren't really interested in that now?
Well, my general opinion in this regard is that, certainly what the main Western countries has done to Syria, it was a crime, and the whole attitude of the European Union, this has been highlighted by Hungarian government actors too, is that, basically, they were criticizing the leadership of Syria, calling it undemocratic because it wasn't a liberal democracy to their liking, but as their actions, led to the rise of terrorist organizations who are basically, persecuting, killing people, making genocide, killing people for belonging to other nationalities or to other religions, for being Christian, etc. They don't care about it. They're completely silent about it. On the other hand, Hungary has this very important approach, I think, with the Hungary Helps program, and also for the State Secretariat, which is helping persecuted Christians around the world, is that that's already a big thing, that they are speaking about this thing, while everyone else in the West is keeping silent about it. And I think it was an important gesture from Hungary to be present now after the earthquake in Syria too, because many countries were flocking to help Turkey, but a lot less support was going to Syria, who needed it very, very much. So I think it's an important thing is that Hungary showed up there. It's not a new thing, because they have been collaborating there through the Hungarian Hungary Health program with the local churches, who actually show great appreciation to the Hungarian government, and they are very thankful for that. Of course, it would have been easier if there was cooperation with the official Syria and not just the churches. And I'm sure that Hungary has some plans and the non-mainstream approach to this problem. Unfortunately, I think that at this point it is not a priority now. Mm-hmm. But hopefully in more peaceful times we will get closer to this question.
Yeah, actually, there are 2 points I want to make here. The first one is the issue that the countries that waged this regime change war in Syria have created the refugee crisis, and then they come to Hungary and ask Hungary to accept refugees in their countries, or illegal migrants, call them whatever you want. And Hungary had a different position in this regard. And in my opinion, if you really care about the people or refugees, don't create a refugee crisis from the first place. Don't create chaos, don't create wars, and create refugee crisis. But when you create a refugee crisis, don't expect other countries to come and take a responsibility for your actions. And this is something that I'm not afraid to say. I myself, I came to Germany after the war, but you guys created this war, and this refugee crisis happened because of this. So before the war, I don't remember not a single Syrian came as a refugee to any European country. They came for studies, they came for work. Mm-hmm. Secondly, when the EU, or even the German foreign minister, she was like, oh, we cannot send humanitarian aid to Syria because the Assad regime doesn't allow us. And this is a pure lie, because first of all, for the past 12 years, they didn't even respect Syria's borders. They were sending tons of weapons through the borders to Syria. Nobody asked if Syria had borders or not. Secondly, the borders that they will send this aid to Syria from the north through Turkey, it's called Bab el-Hawa border crossing. And it's not even in the hands of the government. It's in the hands of Turkey, and it's in the hands of the militants, anti-government militants. So this was just an excuse not to send aid. Now they sent 2 planes. One came from Romania and the other one from Belgium, and the third one from Germany. Finally, just 3 planes landed in Syria. But the religious authorities, I spoke to two head of churches in Syria, and they assured me that the Hungarian side has helped them. So I would like to deliver my also gratitude and thanks from the Syrian people, because they were really, really in dire need for such help. But Mariann, it was really a pleasure talking to you today and to shed light on Hungary's foreign policy and Hungary in general. I'm one of the people that I'm really also interested in Hungary, and I would like also to travel to Hungary soon and explore your beautiful country. Thank you very much for being with me. Guys, as I mentioned, her Twitter account in the description. If you're interested in the Hungarian affairs, please go and hit her a follow. Mariann, thank you very much again for being my guest.
Thank you for the invitation, and hopefully see you soon in Hungary.
Yeah, see you soon, inshallah, we say in Arabic.